Please, just do this for me. One dinner. That's all. Daniel Wright had said yes before thinking it through. He rarely did favors, especially personal ones, but that evening his friend had sounded truly desperate. The blind date had been planned for weeks, and cancelling at the last moment would have caused problems. Daniel agreed to go in his place, just to be polite. He told himself it meant nothing. One dinner, no attachments. Daniel arrived at the restaurant under a name that was not his. He wore a simple dark suit, calm and controlled as always. He did not tell anyone who he really was. He believed it was safer that way. He planned to sit, eat, be respectful, and leave early. Across the room, Clara Hayes paused just inside the door. Clara was 43 years old and worked as the coordinator of a community center. Her days were long and demanding, filled with people who depended on her. She did not often think about herself. That was why she had agreed to help her friend. Her friend had cancelled the blind date only an hour earlier, nervous and embarrassed. She had met someone she fancied and wanted to meet with him instead of her blind date. She begged Clara to take her place so the man would not be left waiting. Clara did not like blind dates. She did not like places that made her feel small or judged. But she agreed because she always did. She believed kindness mattered. They found each other at the same table. At first they smiled politely, unsure. Daniel reached for his glass at the same moment Clara did. Their fingers brushed lightly against each other. Both paused for half a second, then pulled back as if nothing had happened. Then the truth came out in simple sentences. Daniel admitted he was not the real date. Clara froze, then surprised herself by laughing softly. She confessed she was not the real date either. The moment felt strange, almost unreal. Two people sent by others, sitting face to face, both ready to stand up and walk away. The silence that followed was heavy. Without planning it, they stayed. The conversation began slowly. Clara spoke about her work at the community center, about children, elderly neighbors, and people who had nowhere else to go. She spoke about responsibility and the quiet weight she carried every day. Daniel listened closely, his hands resting still on the table. He did not interrupt. When he spoke, he avoided details. He did not say he was a millionaire. He did not say he led a company. He spoke instead about long workdays, pressure, and how lonely success could feel. There was no flirting, no jokes meant to impress. Their voices stayed calm, honest, and careful. The restaurant faded around them. Time passed without warning. Clara noticed how easy it felt to talk, and Daniel noticed how rare it was to feel understood. When the waiter cleared the table, reality returned. Outside, the night air was cool. Daniel stepped ahead and held the door open for Clara. As she passed, their hands touched briefly on the handle. Neither of them moved away right away. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but both felt it. They stood near the entrance, unsure how to end something that had not been planned. Clara felt a quiet pull she did not trust. Daniel felt the same pull and did not fight it. "I don't usually do this," Clara said softly. "Neither do I," Daniel answered. He hesitated, then took out his phone. Clara watched him, surprised by her own relief. When they exchanged numbers, there was a pause. They looked at each other for a moment longer than necessary, the street noise fading into the background. Neither spoke. Neither rushed. Then the phones were put away. Daniel suggested meeting again, here, same restaurant, same table. Clara nodded. The idea felt safe, familiar. They parted with small smiles, neither promising too much. As Clara walked away, she wondered why a simple dinner felt important. As Daniel watched her disappear into the street, he wondered why he already wanted to return. "I almost didn't come back tonight." Clara said it softly as she sat down at the same table in the same restaurant. The words surprised even her. She had spent the whole day thinking of reasons not to come when Daniel called. Still, she came. Daniel was already there, waiting, calm as before. He nodded, as if he understood more than she had said. They ordered the same drinks without discussion. That small choice made the moment feel familiar. The conversation moved gently at first. Clara talked about her day, about small problems that never fully ended. Her hands rested loosely on the table as she spoke. Then her voice changed. She began to speak about her work at the Greenwood Community Centre, where she was the coordinator. She explained that the centre was a safe place for the neighbourhood. During the day, it offered after-school programs for children, art and homework support, and simple meals for those who needed them. In the evenings, older people came to play games, attend workshops, or simply sit and talk so they would not feel alone. As she spoke, Daniel leaned forward slightly, drawn in without meaning to. He caught himself and stopped, settling back in his chair, as if reminding himself to stay where he was. Clara said she organized the programs, managed volunteers, and helped families find support when life became too difficult. She spoke of children who stayed until closing time because home did not feel safe, and of elderly neighbors who came every day just to be seen. The center, she explained, was not just a building. It was a place where people felt they belonged. Daniel listened in silence. His hands stayed folded on the table, but his fingers tightened slightly. He asked careful questions. He did not mention his work. He did not mention money. Clara hesitated, then said what had been pressing on her chest. The center might close. A large company wanted the land. Lawyers were involved. Letters had been sent. As she spoke faster, her hands moved, then suddenly stopped. She pulled them back into her lap, as if realizing how much she was revealing. She admitted she was tired of fighting something much bigger than herself. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle between them. His face stayed calm, but something tightened inside him. Without thinking, he shifted forward again, his hand moving slightly across the table, almost reaching for hers. He stopped himself just in time, curling his fingers back instead. He said nothing about how familiar her story sounded. He only said, "That must be hard." Clara nodded. Then she did something she had not planned. She spoke about her past marriage, about a man who had promised protection and safety, but had chosen power instead. As she spoke, she folded her arms loosely, not defensively, but carefully. She explained how she learned not to trust men who stood too high above others. Daniel felt the sentence land like a quiet warning. He wanted to speak. He wanted to correct her view. He wanted to tell her she was wrong about him, but he stayed silent. He told himself it was not the right time. He told himself the truth could wait. The mood changed after that. The air felt heavier. Clara noticed it first. She leaned back slightly, creating space where there had been none. Her eyes no longer rested on his face for long. "I talk too much," she said, trying to smile. "No," Daniel replied quickly. "You don't." But the moment had already shifted. What had been warm now felt exposed. Clara felt the familiar fear rise. She had shared too much. She had let someone see too close. When the waiter returned, she asked for the bill before Daniel could speak. Outside, the night felt colder than before. They stood near the door, close enough to feel each other's presence, far enough not to touch. Daniel wanted to ask her to stay longer. Clara wanted to believe she could. "I should go," she said. Daniel nodded, hiding his disappointment. They exchanged a brief look that held more than words could carry. As Clara walked away, her heart beat faster than it should have. Something important had almost started, and she had stepped back from it. Daniel watched her leave, knowing he had crossed a line he could not return from. He had listened. He had cared, and he had not told the truth. The next time they met, silence would not be so kind. "This can't be right. I don't remember this." Daniel said it out loud as he stared at his laptop screen. The words felt weak in the quiet of his apartment. He had just returned home, jacket still on, shoes left by the door. He had not even turned on the lights. Something inside him had pushed him toward the computer before he could rest. The document glowed softly in the dark room. Project approval, property, Greenwood Community Centre. Daniel leaned closer. His eyes moved slowly down the page. Legal language, numbers, dates, clauses. Everything looked familiar. too familiar. This was the kind of document he saw every day, the kind he approved without emotion. Then he reached the bottom. His name was there, his signature. For a long moment he did not move. Daniel had signed hundreds of documents like this over the years. He had built his career on speed and trust in the system. Reports were prepared, risks were summarized, assistants marked files as urgent. He signed, believing that progress meant efficiency and that efficiency meant success. He had told himself this was leadership. Now the screen told a different story. His company planned to demolish the Greenwood Community Center, and he had approved it 3 months earlier. Daniel scrolled back up, reading faster, as if speed could change meaning. It did not. The decision was clear. The plan was final. The people inside the building were not mentioned. Only land value, development, profit. Clara's voice returned to him without warning, the way she spoke about the center, the tired care in her words. People need this place, she had said. It keeps them together. Daniel closed his eyes. He understood now why he did not remember signing the document. To him, the center had not been a place. It had been a line on a page, a number inside a report. He had not destroyed it on purpose. He had destroyed it by not looking closely. That realization hurt more than anger ever could. He stood and walked to the window. The city lights below were bright but distant. For years, he had believed growth meant improvement. That if numbers rose, life improved with them. That progress was always good, even when it erased something old. Tonight, that belief felt empty. He returned to the laptop and opened another file. Financial details appeared. The reason the project moved so quickly became clear. The land was valuable. The returns were high. There was also a clause tied to company shares. His shares. The demolition would strengthen his position in the company. Daniel felt sick. For the first time, he saw the full picture. The system rewarded him for decisions that harmed people he never met. His success had been built not only on work, but on distance. Saving the center would not be easy. It would cost money. It would weaken his control. The board would question him. Some would turn against him. But doing nothing would mean accepting who he had become. Daniel closed the laptop slowly and sat down. His hands rested on his knees. His breathing felt shallow. He had always believed power meant control. Now he understood that power also meant responsibility. He looked again at his signature on the screen. That single line had taken something away. And for the first time in his life, Daniel knew he could not move forward unless he tried to put it back. Please, don't take this place away. The words were not spoken to Daniel, but he heard them anyway as he stood across the street. He had come without telling anyone. No assistant, no driver, no name. Just a man walking toward a building he had only known as a line in a document. The community center looked old, but alive. Paint peeled in places, yet the windows were open. Laughter drifted out, light and careless. Daniel stopped for a moment before entering. His chest felt tight, as if he was stepping into something he did not fully deserve to see. Inside, the space felt warm and busy. Children sat on the floor with paper and colors spread around them. In another room, older people played a board game, arguing and laughing at the same time. Nothing looked perfect. Nothing looked expensive. And yet, everything felt full. Daniel stood near the wall, unnoticed. He watched Clara move through the rooms. She bent down to speak to a child, her voice calm and patient. She helped an older man pick up fallen pieces without making him feel small. She smiled often, but her smile was tired, earned. Daniel felt something shift inside him. A small girl walked up to him and looked at his shoes, then at his face. "Are you lost?" she asked. Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I'm just looking." She nodded, thinking. "Adults look strange when they think too much," she said. "Are you thinking?" Daniel smiled without meaning to. "Yes." She studied him for a second longer. "Why do adults destroy good things?" she asked. The question was simple. It was not angry. It was curious. Daniel did not answer right away. He did not know how. "Sometimes," he said finally, "they forget what matters." The girl seemed satisfied. She ran back to the others, leaving Daniel standing still. Her words stayed with him, heavier than any report he had ever read. He watched Clara again. She laughed at something a child said, a real laugh. The sound struck him harder than he expected. This was what his signature would erase. Not walls, not land, lives. Daniel turned toward the door. He did not speak to Clara. He did not want her to see him there, watching, understanding, too late. If she looked at him now, he feared she would see the truth in his eyes. Outside, the air felt colder. The sounds faded behind him. Daniel stood on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. His hands shook slightly, but his mind felt clear for the first time in days. He knew what the decision would cost. He knew who would fight him. He knew how alone he might become. But he also knew this place should not disappear. Daniel walked away without looking back. That night, as he opened his laptop once more, the cursor blinked over his signature. And this time, he did not hesitate. If we lose today, we lose everything. The thought stayed with Clara as she stood behind the microphone. Today was the public hearing to defend the community center. Her hands felt cold, but her voice did not shake. She looked out at the room filled with familiar faces, parents, children, older neighbors. The weight of their hope pressed gently, then heavily, on her chest. Clara spoke slowly. She talked about afternoons filled with noise and laughter, about lonely mornings made better by a shared table, about a place that held people when the world did not. She felt every sentence as she spoke it, as if it had lived inside her for years. When she finished, the room was quiet. Too quiet. Then the company lawyers stood. Their voices were calm and practiced. They spoke of contracts, permits, and plans already approved. They spoke of progress and growth. Their words were clean and sharp, like tools that did not care what they cut. Clara felt the air change. She saw it in the faces around her. Hope thinned. Fear returned. She knew that look well. It was the look of people who had fought before and lost. The decision seemed close. Too close. That was when the door at the back of the room opened. Daniel stepped inside. He did not rush. He walked forward with steady steps, his face calm but pale. Clara noticed him only when a quiet wave of whispers moved through the room. She turned, confused at first. Then her breath caught. It was him, the man from the restaurant, the quiet listener, the man who had stayed when he could have left. Daniel did not look at Clara right away. He went straight to the front. When he spoke, his voice was clear and controlled. He said his name. He said his position. He said he was responsible for the project. The room stirred. Some people shifted in their seats. Others leaned forward. Daniel admitted the approval had been his. He said he had signed without understanding the full cost. He said that was a mistake he would not repeat. His words were simple, but each one landed heavily. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. The project would not move forward. The company would not demolish the community center. Instead, it would fund it. Fully. For a moment, no one moved. Then the room exploded into sound. People stood. Some cried. Some laughed. Clara stayed frozen. Her ears rang. Her mind tried to catch up with her heart. She looked at Daniel again, really looked this time. The way he stood. The confidence she had missed before. The truth rose slowly, painfully. He was the man behind the threat. Their eyes met across the room. Daniel held her gaze, steady but uncertain. Clara felt a mix of emotions rush through her. Relief, gratitude, confusion, and something close to betrayal. The hearing ended in noise and movement. People hugged. Voices overlapped. But Clara did not move. She stood still as the truth settled inside her. The man she had trusted had also been the danger she was fighting, and she did not yet know whether to thank him or walk away forever. "You should have told me." The words came out sharper than Clara expected. The hallway outside the hearing room was almost empty now. The noise, the cheers, the hugs, all of it had stayed behind. What remained was quiet, and the truth standing between them. Daniel stopped walking. He did not look surprised. In fact, he looked tired, as if he had been waiting for this moment. He turned to face her slowly and stood very still, his hands relaxed at his sides, giving her space to speak. "You're right," he said. "I should have." Clara crossed her arms tightly, a familiar movement she did not think about. Her hands were still shaking, but she did not hide them. "You sat across from me. You listened to me talk about losing everything. And you said nothing." Daniel nodded once and said, "I was wrong." There was no excuse in his voice, no defense. That made her angrier. "You don't get to decide when the truth matters," she said. "You don't get to protect me by lying." "I wasn't trying to protect you," he answered quietly. "I was protecting myself." The honesty stopped her for a moment. She looked at him, really looked. The man standing there did not look powerful now. He looked human, vulnerable. And in that stillness, Daniel realized something he had been avoiding. He was not just sorry. He was in love. The understanding settled quietly inside him, heavy and undeniable. Daniel admitted that he was ashamed and afraid that if she knew, she would never speak to him again. Clara felt the weight of that sentence settle inside her. Her arms loosened slightly, then tightened again. She turned away and took a breath. The celebration had saved the center. That should have been enough. But emotions did not follow rules. "What you did today mattered," she said, her voice lower now. "You saved this place." Daniel shook his head. "I fixed a mistake I made. That's not the same thing." They stood in silence for a few seconds. The space between them felt full, heavy with words not yet spoken. Without thinking, Daniel stepped forward and pulled her into a brief hug. It was instinctive, human. Clara froze for half a second, then rested her forehead lightly against his shoulder. Then she stepped back, aware of her pounding heart. Too soon, too fast, but necessary. "We still have work to do," Clara said at last. "The center needs planning, repairs, structure." "I know," Daniel said. "I want to help, if you'll let me." She turned back to him. "We can work together," she said carefully. "But that's all." Daniel did not argue. He nodded again. "I understand." "No dinners," she added. "No pretending. No mixing things." "Agreed." The decision felt final, even though it hurt. Clara felt something tighten in her chest as she said it. Daniel felt it too, but he did not step closer again. They walked out of the building together, then stopped at the steps. "This doesn't mean I forgive you," Clara said. "I wouldn't expect that," Daniel replied and laughed. They parted there, going in different directions, both aware of the distance they had chosen. Over the next days they worked side by side, meetings, plans, long discussions about budgets and repairs. They spoke politely, professionally, too professionally. Every small moment carried something unsaid. Sometimes Clara caught Daniel watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Sometimes Daniel noticed Clara pause, as if she wanted to say more, then pull back again. Their feelings did not disappear. They simply stayed quiet, waiting. One evening, as Clara locked up the center, she found Daniel standing outside looking at the building. She joined him. They stood in silence again, not touching, not moving, and both wondered how long distance could hold back what was already growing. "You're losing control of the company." The sentence followed Daniel long after the meeting ended. It had been spoken calmly, almost kindly, which made it worse. He sat alone in the large conference room, the chairs still warm from people who had already decided his future without him. The board meeting had been quiet but tense. No one shouted. No one needed to. The looks were enough. The questions were sharp and repeated. Why had he acted alone? Why had he changed a signed plan? Why had he chosen people over profit? Daniel listened. He answered when needed. He did not defend himself the way he once would have. Somewhere inside, something had already shifted. Outside the building, reporters waited. Cameras turned toward him. Questions flew through the air. Some were about money, some were about leadership, and some were about Clara. They said her name like it was a problem. She influenced him. He lost focus. He's no longer thinking clearly. Daniel walked past without stopping. He kept his face still, but every word landed. Clara had warned him this would happen. He had known it too. Still, hearing it aloud hurt more than he expected. Later that evening, Daniel sat in his apartment with his phone in his hand. He stared at a message from his sister that he had read 3 times already. "You're changing," it said. "Are you sure this is worth it?" He thought of his family, of dinners missed, of calls ignored, of years spent proving his value through work alone. His success had always been the answer. Now that answer felt uncertain. Daniel opened his laptop again. Reports waited, emails stacked. Messages from advisors filled the screen. Every line pointed in the same direction. If he continued this path, he would lose support. He might lose his position. He might lose everything he had built. For the first time, he asked himself a question he had avoided for years. What had he really built? His thoughts turned to the community center, to the sound of laughter inside, to the way Clara moved through the rooms with quiet strength. She had not asked him to sacrifice anything. She had only asked him to be honest. Daniel leaned back and closed his eyes. The room felt empty, not lonely in the old way, but clear, honest. The next day, he returned to work with a new weight on his shoulders. People spoke carefully around him now. Some avoided him. Others watched closely. He noticed the change in their eyes, respect mixed with doubt. At the end of the day, Daniel stood alone in his office. The city stretched out below him, busy and unaware. He understood now that doing the right thing did not feel heroic. It felt quiet, heavy, lonely. His phone buzzed once, a short message from Clara. The plans were approved. "Thank you." He stared at the words longer than necessary. Daniel set the phone down and looked back at the city. He did not know how much more he would lose, but he knew this much. The cost had only begun to show itself. "We can't pretend anymore." The words came out softly, almost lost under the sound of rain. The storm had arrived without warning. Power went out across the neighborhood, and the community center fell into darkness except for a few emergency lights. Clara and Daniel were the only ones left inside. Everyone else had gone home before the rain turned heavy. The wind pushed against the windows. Rain hit the roof again and again, steady and loud. There would be no leaving tonight. The roads were flooded. Phones showed no signal. They were trapped together, not by choice but by weather. They sat on opposite sides of the room at first. The mood felt tight, full of things unsaid. Clara folded her hands in her lap. Daniel leaned back against the wall. The silence lasted longer than comfort allowed. After a while they moved without speaking. They sat on the floor near the wall, closer now, their shoulders almost touching. The distance between them felt louder than the storm. Clara spoke first. She said she was tired of being careful, tired of pretending that nothing stood between them. Daniel listened, his eyes fixed on the floor. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. He said the pressure at work was growing, that people blamed her for his choices, that staying close to her made everything harder. Clara admitted what she had avoided for weeks. She said she loved him. The word felt heavy, but true. As she said it, her hands trembled slightly against her knees. Daniel closed his eyes when he heard it. When he opened them again, his expression was calm and broken at the same time. He said he loved her too. He had known it for a while. He had fought it. He had lost. They sat even closer now. Daniel lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers touched her face gently, as if she might disappear if he moved too fast. Clara closed her eyes at the touch, leaning into it before she could stop herself. The emergency light cast soft shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm continued. Daniel said that staying together right now would hurt her. He said the attention, the rumors, the pressure would grow worse. Clara agreed. She said she did not want to be the reason he lost everything. She had spent her life holding things together, not tearing them apart. Daniel leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air. Then slowly, carefully, their lips met. The kiss was soft and uncertain, full of everything they were not saying. It did not last long, but it carried more weight than anything before it. When they pulled apart, neither of them spoke. They hugged. Clara pressed her face against his shoulder. Daniel held her as if memorizing the feeling. When they stepped back, Clara wiped her eyes. Daniel looked away, ashamed of his own tears. "This is the right choice," Clara said, even though it hurt to say it. Daniel nodded. "It doesn't feel right." They stayed awake through most of the night, sitting close but not touching anymore, listening to the storm fade slowly into silence. By morning, the rain had stopped. When the doors finally opened, they walked out together, then stopped at the steps. They did not promise anything, and neither knew if walking away meant the end or only the beginning. "We need to review every decision you made." The sentence was cold and final. Daniel heard it in a quiet room filled with people who did not smile and were questioning his decisions. Rumors have spread that Daniel's decision to fund the community center was a money laundering attempt. The investigation had begun. Papers covered the table. Screens showed numbers and timelines. Everything he had touched was now under a sharp light. The audit moved quickly, but it felt endless. Daniel answered questions again and again. He stayed calm. He told the truth. He did not defend his feelings. He spoke only of actions, process, and responsibility. Still, the pressure was heavy. Every pause felt like judgment. Across the city, Clara sat in another room, facing different eyes. Hers were not lawyers, but officials and advisors. They asked about her work, her meetings with Daniel, her role in the project. Their voices were polite, but their looks were not. Some of them already had an answer in mind. Clara felt small for the first time in months, not weak, but exposed. She explained the same story she had always told. She had fought for the community center long before she met Daniel. She had asked for nothing personal. She had gained nothing private. Still, she felt the weight of suspicion settle on her shoulders. When she left the room, she did not cry. She walked slowly, holding herself steady. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing important was happening. That hurt more than the questions. Days passed. Daniel stopped checking his phone so often. Clara stopped hoping for messages. They did not meet. They did not call. Distance became routine. Silence became normal. Then, one morning, the results came. The audit found no wrongdoing. Every decision followed the rules. Every change had legal support. The funding stood firm. The project was safe. The community center would continue. Daniel read the report alone in his office. Relief washed over him, quiet and deep. But it did not bring joy. It brought space. And in that space, absence grew clearer. Later that day, news spread quickly. The board member who had pushed hardest against the project resigned. Officially, it was for personal reasons. Unofficially, everyone understood why. The pressure had turned back on itself. Clara heard the news from a co-worker. She closed her eyes when she heard it. The fight was over. The center was safe. Everything she had worked for had survived. And yet, she felt empty. That evening, Daniel stood outside the community center without going in. The lights were on. People moved inside. Life continued. He did not step closer. He knew his presence might only complicate things again. Clara stood by a window inside, unaware he was there. She looked tired but calm. Daniel watched from a distance, knowing this was the cost of doing the right thing. The danger had passed. The future looked secure. But love had stepped aside. As Daniel turned away, he wondered if safety was enough. And as Clara locked the door later that night, she wondered the same. The hardest part was not losing. It was winning alone. It's finished. We really did it. Clara whispered the words to herself as she stood inside the community centre. The walls were freshly painted, the floors were clean, sunlight moved easily through the windows. The building felt the same, yet different. People filled the rooms again. Children ran past with laughter. Older neighbours sat together, talking as if no time had passed. The centre was alive. That was all Clara had wanted from the beginning. Months had gone by since the audit. Life had slowed into something steady. Clara had been offered a bigger job in another city, more money. She had listened politely, then said no. This place still needed her, and she still needed it. Outside, Daniel stood at the edge of the crowd. He no longer wore the clothes of a man in charge. He had stepped down from his role quietly, without drama. For the first time in years, his time belonged to him. He watched Clara from a distance. She moved through the room with calm confidence, greeting people, smiling without effort. She looked lighter than before. So did he. They noticed each other at the same moment. They walked toward each other slowly, meeting near the doorway. For a second neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. "You stayed," Daniel said at last. "Yes," Clara replied. "So did you." They smiled, small and honest. There was no anger left between them, no need to explain old choices. Time had already done that work. They walked together through the centre. Clara showed him what had changed: a new room for children, a quiet space for rest, a wall covered with drawings from the neighbourhood. As they walked, their shoulders brushed now and then, naturally, without either of them stepping away. They sat on the steps outside when the day began to fade. The noise softened. The lights inside glowed warm and steady. Without thinking, Clara leaned slightly toward him. After a moment, she rested her head on his shoulder. Daniel stayed still, then gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face, careful not to disturb the quiet between them. "I don't have big plans anymore," Daniel said. "I don't know if that's a loss or a gift." Clara looked at him. "Maybe it's both." She told him about the job offer she had refused. Daniel did not question her choice. He understood it too well. They sat in silence for a while, watching people pass. Daniel reached for her hand, not as a question this time, but as something already agreed upon. Their fingers fit together easily. The city felt close, but no longer heavy. "We don't have to decide everything now," Clara said quietly. Daniel nodded. "I don't want to rush anything." There was no promise spoken aloud, only a shared understanding that neither wanted to walk away again. Daniel leaned in and kissed her once, softly, not urgent, not uncertain. Clara smiled against his cheek when it ended. As evening settled, they stood up together, still holding hands. Their bodies stayed close as they walked back toward the centre, not ahead of one another, not behind, side by side.